Any more clarity from either Oklahoma or Texas on their departure?
No, they've told us that they will be staying until June 30th, 25. So that's what we're planning on.
Have the lines of communication in either Austin or Norman been more open since all that happened?
Well, they're on our board meetings and they're in our AD calls. So yeah, they're fully participating.
Did they talk to you about an earlier exit though? Any lawyer talk?
Haven't been any discussions at all.
The playoffs. It sounded like you got very far this week. What do you think the future is with an expanded playoff before the end of the current contract?
Well, just for purely logistical reasons, year 11 is probably in some jeopardy at this point, just because there's good and appropriate things you have to do in order to host the games, book hotels, have a venue, those kinds of things. So we really have been on the clock, I think, relative to implementation in year 11, which would be 24, 25. And, so remains to be seen if that's a possibility. I think it's also a possibility that we wouldn't be able to do it for year 12. And we'd be talking about what do we do year 13 and beyond. Because, for all intents and purposes, the CFP goes away in 25, 26. There's no operating agreement beyond 25, 26, and there are no contracts that bind us beyond 25, 26. So, these are important discussions, and I think all of us feel like we should continue to have them now. But there's we don't all agree on the elements. Until we do, we move forward.
Bob, some of the biggest disagreements.
I'm not going to get into listing them for all the obvious reasons, but they're relatively few at this point, but they are not insignificant.
Bob, the Pac-12 commissioner last night made reference to the idea that at a certain point beyond the contract, George kind of alluded to the idea that, well, we may only need consensus from 5 conferences to sort of set up a playoff, as opposed to.
You'll have to ask him for a clarification on that, because our board of managers manages by unanimous consent. That isn't going to change between now and the end of the contract.
Bob, is the ACC the one most staunchly opposed to the 12-team model? From what I've
No, I wouldn't lay it at their doorstep. I think there's not everybody has the same issue, but several have an issue, but I wouldn't say no that it's any more them than anybody else.
Well, I guess the theory is that if it's a 12 team, that Notre Dame could force their hand to join the ACC.
Don't let your imagination get away with you.
Bob, do you need unanimous consent in talking about the next contract?
There is no next contract. Until we get together and say, we may say, hey, we're not going to get there on years 11 and 12. We're just not going to get there to make changes. And so we'll go to work then, probably in the next 24 months, on what does it look like beyond 25, 26. And that may be starting over. It may be start from scratch. I suspect that a lot of the work that the working group did will be a basis for that, because we did a fairly thorough vetting on virtually any model you can name. And so it's likely to be the underpinning of it, but you never know.
You keep all your notes? 2 years?
What you liked about the 12-team model when you helped formulate it, as it related to the Big 12, what has changed since the Big 12 has changed? Do you still like it for what's going to be the new look Big 12, or how does the 12-team model affect the new Big 12?
We went into the process trying to think about what was best for college football, and I think the 4 of us did a pretty good job of that. none of us can truly leave our hat at the door. But I think the 12-team model is the one that is the best for college football. It's going to, with 5 or 6 weeks to go in the season, there's going to be 40 schools that have a legitimate claim to a playoff spot.
This reminder, the
That's
athletic communication
good for
staff for
regular
both
season
Baylor and
attendance.
Oklahoma State
That's good
are
for
available
TV
to assist you throughout the game. David Kay, Max
with 3 weeks
Calderwall,
to go,
and
there's
other
going
members
to
of the
be
Baylor staff
15
are seated on row 2, seats
I
55
think
through
this year
57.
is somewhat
John
emblematic
McGuire,
of
Kevin
what
Lang,
we'll see
and other
in
members from the
12-team
Oklahoma State
playoff.
staff
They'll
are
just
seated on row
be,
2,
you won't
seats
have
60 through
who's
62.
in, and it'll
Should you
be
need
5
assistance or have
schools.
questions, please do not hesitate
It'll
to
be a whole
ask.
lot more than that, and I think it'll be very interesting. I think it'll be good for college football.
What do you say to them, to a 12-team model?
I've already said it to them.
Bob, the idea of AQs obviously has come up, and Kevin came out the other day and said
AT&T Stadium has a wireless press box.
he's in
Please check your seat
favor
card on
of
press row
5
for login
AQs
instructions.
for the Power 5
Stadium personnel
conferences.
will be available to
I'm
assist.
sure you're saying something exceedingly intelligent.
So when Kevin the other day came out and said that he was in favor of these 5 AQs for the 5 Power 5 conferences, I know that's been a new talking point, a new debate point. Is there a way to compromise something between what you propose, the top 6, and a 5+1?
We'll find out.
Once again, please do so
I mean,
with an AT&T
that's the
Stadium
essence
media
of it.
operations staff member.
But, we found
And
out
as a reminder,
the extent to which we anoint ourselves with privileges, including automatic access,
Please
is
disable all power
usually
off
the
your
extent to
mobile
which we get
hotspot
called
while
before
inside
Congress
AT&T
or we
Stadium.
get challenged.
Instead, please use the free AT&T
There
Wi-Fi provided by
are
the
good
stadium.
reasons why we
If you need further
propose
assistance, once again,
6
please
highest
consult
ranked
with an
conference
AT&T Stadium
champions.
media operations staff
And
member.
those reasons haven't changed. Now, there are those who may or may not be able to say yes to that. We're going to have to decide if we can continue making progress. We can't, then we move on with 4 and figure out what happens in year 13.
Bob, has the conference had talks with TV networks about an extension and what sort of financial outlook you guys have when the new schools come in?
We've got a stipulation in our contract to begin conversations in March of 24, and so we won't likely do much before that. But we talk with our TV partners many times a year, and it's, I suppose either party can say there are good reasons why we should do this early, but none of those conversations have taken place.
You mentioned doing what's best for the sport. Does it concern you when you see a situation where a coach of a team that can still make the playoff opts to depart largely because of the early signing period?
You mean the early signing period and the money? Well, I'm not sure that I have a dog in the fight on that, so I don't really have an answer for that.
Any feedback or fallout from the Texas Tech radio situation and your penalty?
Well, I'm not sure it's exactly correct to say that it was my penalty, but
The conferences decision.
Yeah, well, and we did it in conjunction with others, but that crew. I don't spend a lot of time poring over radio broadcasts, but that situation was brought to our attention. I listened to about 9 minutes of the broadcast, and they were way over the line. It wasn't even close. And I'm as big a believer in the First Amendment as anybody, but they were way past listing the names of officials and calling out people as dishonest at the conference office is just way beyond the pale. So I've had some of the radio people tell me that now I have every crew scared to death that they're going to say something inappropriate and I'm going to suspend them. Wouldn't look for that if I were you.
Bob, you have 4 teams playing today. Where's your level of satisfaction with how the future of the league is looking today?
I don't have 4 teams playing today yet.
Yeah.
But we're obviously going to keep an eye on other games, partly because they bear on what happens with us. But I think our new members are playing well, and we thought they would.
The national relevance, obviously, for for those 4 schools about as good as you could have hoped for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one that's probably was most nationally prominent prior to coming in, UCF, has had a lot of injuries and had some difficulties, but they're going to play it on.
Can you characterize the difference between how you felt at the end of July when the bleep was hitting the fan and how you feel right now?
Are you asking about the departures of the 2 schools, or the fact that I was exposed to Bill Self on the same day and he had COVID?
I guess I missed that story. You want to tell me that story?
Well,
I missed that story.
We met with Bill on the same day, and we were flying back from Kansas, and when we landed, those were the 2 stories that
I guess I missed
were
that one.
trending, and he had just announced that he was positive for COVID. So July 21st was an exciting day.
One of your best landings. So
Yeah, one of our best landings, yeah.
Yeah, so now about Oklahoma and Texas. The difference between just the mood and either when you go home and take your sip of wine or I mean, you feel, how buoy do you feel?
It's been whiskey lately. Well, I have just tried to work through this the best we could. I've tried to listen to our board and our ADs, and some of the people involved were close friends,
Right.
and so you'd sort of would be less than human if that wasn't a little bit personal. But you got to quickly get past that, and we did, and the board charted a path, and I executed it along with staff, and we've gotten to a place that has turned out well. But you don't replace national brands like the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma. We'll be just fine, but you don't replace guys like that.
Thanks, guys.